for a given time and location. And the threshold given for a given location or geographical area largely depends on the local weather conditions, the vulnerability of the people, and ecosystems exposed to heat. Honorable Speaker, it is likely that a number of perceived extreme heat events will occur in regions of the country as temperatures continue to rise in response to climate warming, with thresholds varying regionally. Mr. Speaker, if members have had the time to peruse some of the annexures to my response, they will see a tabulation of projected risks and impacts of climate change on human life, also the risks pertaining to health, and also pertaining to food security and even animals. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the issues raised by the Honourable Member, in Kenya, like many other sub-Saharan African countries, extreme heat events and attributed impacts such as emergency room visits, hospitalization, human and livestock deaths, and loss of productive hours are not documented, and heat waves are not recorded sufficiently. And few studies have attempted to assess changes in heat waves in various African regions. However, these fragmented studies do not provide succinct and comprehensive information for the necessary decision making. Weather conditions that could result in health risks depend on the sensitivity, acclimatization, and adaptability of the population to extreme heat. And temperatures is the main component of heat, and it also depends on various weather variables. Coming to the exact question on whether Kenya has ever experienced heat waves in recent years, research into heat waves across the world has confirmed that the increasing trends in frequency, duration, and cumulative heat have accelerated since the 1950s due to the climate change. The biggest increases have been seen in the Middle East, South America, and Africa. And they project the deadliest disasters that are getting stronger and more frequent every other day. In the recent past, Honorable Speaker, heat wave events have been recorded around the world, with examples of 3,000 people dying in the United Kingdom, 300 displaced in Italy, 600 people dying in Spain. Mr. Speaker, chronic exposure to extreme heat in the form of seasonal and year-round extreme heat, especially in tropical regions, have far-reaching impacts on health, productivity, and economic outcomes. Generally, public perceptions and awareness of heat in Kenya are very low, and there is therefore need to raise the awareness of heat risks, especially in this country, where we have a substantive number of low-income populations. For instance, due to lack of awareness, heat-related instances and illnesses might have people underestimating these illnesses and the seriousness of heat situations, and do not actually then go to hospital when they are required to go. Based on analysis of data from 1975, the year 2022 was the third warmest year on record, tying with 2021, and followed closely behind by 2019 and 2020 as the first and second warmest respectively. Intrigued by undocumented heat waves, cases and concerns of their impacts, our Kenya Meteorological Department recently conducted research to identify high-risk regions define heat thresholds, and initiate a protocol to operationalize heat wave early warning in Kenya for early action and for purposes of informing adaptation strategies. This analysis showed that recently identified extreme heat events occurred in Kenya in March 2016, April to May 2019, March 2020, and February of 2021. The extreme episode of March 2016 lasted for at least 7 days, with impacts including increases in admission in hospitals in the cities of Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. Another study carried out in 2022 identified extreme heat events of 1991, 2005, and 2012 over Nairobi, Tana River, and Turkana counties respectively. And most heat events recorded in the selected counties were observed to begin around the months of February to March. The study concluded that owing to the established direct relation between extreme heat events and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease prevalence, the observed events ranging from normal to very extreme have had a great negative impact on human respiratory health. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to inform the House on the link between climate change, heat waves, and drought, also known as climate change, heat waves, drought nexus. The impacts of recurrent droughts in arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya continue to worsen, with significant impact on lives, health, losses in livestock and livelihoods. And it is highly likely that droughts are coupled with heat in these regions, are increasing trends in temperatures have been observed in recent times. Mr. Speaker, sir, these issues highlighted do compound dry events, heat waves, and droughts, and they change dramatically under global warming, but have never been systematically studied in Kenya. However, it is feasible to state that the livestock deaths associated with long drought were spurred by extreme heat stress on the animals brought out by heat extremes, high evaporative demand that results in low soil moisture and decreased surface water availability. The need to understand the compounding risk posed by the combined effects of droughts and extreme heat events, especially in arid and semi-arid areas of Kenya, is dire. Mr. Speaker, extreme heat events interact with other factors such as exposure and vulnerability and inadequate adaptive capacity, resulting in greater impacts. The associated impacts of extreme heat events on livestock are negative psychological effects of heat stress on animals' metabolism and productivity, and indirectly via increased disease burden, reduced water availability, and inadequate pasture. Mr. Speaker, with regards to the question, to provide the status of records maintained on critical heat wave events experienced in the country, and to clarify whether such records have been used to provide disaster warning, I will say, Mr. Speaker, that the World Meteorological Organization concluded that the past 8 years were the warmest on record globally, fueled by ever-rising greenhouse gas concentrations, accumulated heat, according to 6 consolidated international temperature data sets. Mr. Speaker, the year 2022 was the 8th consecutive year between 2015 and 2022 that annual global temperatures have reached at least 1% above the pre-industrial levels. And in view of this, Kenya started monitoring heat waves from 2022. This monitoring was likewise spurred on by an analysis done in the generation of the annual state of the climate document, which is annexed in this presentation, Mr. Speaker. And in the initial analysis carried out, examined daily data from 1991 to date and identified the following thresholds for issuing heat health alert warnings in Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa respectively, based on the historical data record. And the thresholds for Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, is that the daily maximum of 32 plus for 3 or more days then would account for a heat wave. In Kisumu, a daily maximum of 37 plus degrees Celsius for 3 or more days would equally be the threshold. And in Mombasa, a daily maximum of 36 plus for 3 or more days would also form the threshold. These heat waves identified in the historical record are all documented as described in the above section with regard to the 3 counties. As previously outlined in the KMD, KMD is working on expanding the threshold to cover many other regions in the country, which would eventually then speak to the adaptation measures required. Additional research and studies are crucial, Mr. Speaker, to determine the impacts of heat waves and other climate change phenomena on livelihoods in Kenya. In its seasonal forecast, the Meteorological Department of Kenya incorporates temperature forecasts for various parts of the country, and these serve to prepare stakeholders and the public for either high or low temperatures during the seasons. Mr. Speaker, on the 4th question, which is the measures the ministry is taking to mitigate the impacts of heat waves on human health and livestock in the country. Mr. Speaker, in arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya and in Africa at large, livestock species, particularly sheep, goats, and cattle, are typically a major source of livelihood and survival and source of food, and may be converted to cash. It supports livelihoods, Mr. Speaker. And with the change in the heat seasons, there is increased vulnerability. This therefore calls for an urgent need to develop effective adaptation strategies, including increased uptake of emerging technology, such as the Zai pits, which are planting pits that provide water-efficient farming technology and are often used in arid and semi-arid areas to maximize water utilization by crops. Mr. Speaker, on the part of the ministry, several measures to mitigate the effects of heat waves on both human and livestock in Kenya have gone into place. The first is that the Kenya Met Department has adopted the Common Alerting Protocol, standard developed by the World Meteorological Organization, to issue early warnings on the onset of events such as floods and strong marine waves, which then provide advisories for the affected communities, be it fishermen, pastoralists, and other communities. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the KMD is in the process of implementing and operationalizing impact-based forecasting, which will serve to support evidence-based decision-making for extreme weather events such as heat waves, both in advisory form as well as in updates and forecasts. And together with other sectors, including water, energy, health, and disaster reduction, KMD is developing thresholds of weather and climate variables to trigger response and action. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the ministry is currently developing the National Climate Change Action Plan, which includes adaptation and mitigation strategies that respond to various impacts with regard to heat increases. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, is the partnership that the Meteorological Department is involved with Resurgence, a development partner, on a project called Daraja, where there is regular issuance of temperature forecasts, including warnings for informal settlements. And examples have been developed for Kibra and Madare based on collaborative thresholds on collaboration. These thresholds are disseminated via text messages to communities and also radios such as Pamoja FM. And this is, the focus emanates from the fact that these informal settlements are largely impacted disproportionately by extreme heat conditions. Mr. Speaker,
wind up.
The fifth intervention, Honorable Speaker, is that the ministry is in the process of modernizing the Kenya Meteorological Department infrastructure so that the department will be in a position to better monitor weather events. And this improved monitoring network will be the basis for development of local scale threshold to detect extreme heat episodes for early warning. And at the opportune time, Honorable Speaker, we shall be reaching out through the relevant committee of this House for the support of the House to actually help modernize and fully equip our meteorological department by turning it into a semi-autonomous government agency that can stand on its feet to respond to the need for scientific-based approaches to early warning systems for us to alleviate the effects of heat waves and other such impacts of climate change. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is one of the biggest needs within the KMD that I know will specifically be followed through the House of Parliament. In terms of recommendations, Mr. Speaker, yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm just about to finish. There is immediate need for measures to be put into place to cushion Kenya from heat waves, and one of which is to support the modernization of the Kenya Meteorological Department. And also, through this information needs to go out to our hospital managers and medical practitioners to pay particular attention to the effects of heat waves on Kenyans. And finally, Mr. Speaker, for the hardest hit regions of northern Kenya, the need to take up specific measures to mitigate against heat waves, including reduction of movement of livestock during extreme weather seasons, reduction of transportation of animals, and focusing only on movement during cooler hours of the day. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the need for alert, for people to stay alert to signs of heat distress, including planting, panting, increased respiration rate, increased water intake, so that people can then get the necessary help. With those presentations, Mr. Speaker, I conclude. Thank you.
Member to ask the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I think I am satisfied. Thank you, the Honorable. Thank you, the Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Member. If you are satisfied, the story ends there. Thank you very much. Minister will release you. Call in the next minister. Thank you very much.